Hello and welcome to this James the Bike Guy, where today in front of us we're getting a chance to take a look at a pretty cool bike from Specialized. And in fact, one of their bikes that often Specialized will take a look at the market and see what others are doing to upgrade the bikes they've sold in the past and bring that into reality. And this bike in front of us here is exactly that, because this is the Specialized Epic Evo. The Evo standing for evolution, where they take what's out in the marketplace and decide how they can upgrade this bike. And this one, being the Pro version, is one step down from the S-Works Mac Daddy top-end bike. So you're getting a heck of a lot of bike here and some cool Kashima parts. Well, let's not geek out just yet, because we're going to take a look at the features and designs of this bike, and then of course we'll find out what it weighs. Talking Specialized Epic. So this is the Specialized Epic Evo, and that means this is an elongated travel version of Specialized renowned and long-standing model line Epic. And Specialized brings out Evo versions of certain bikes when they see an opportunity to take a platform or a design that they have and give it some factory upgrades like they're seeing out on the trail. And for that, this Specialized Epic Evo slots in at what might be considered a downcountry style bike by having 120 millimeters of front suspension travel and 110 millimeters of rear suspension travel. And that's done by running the same front triangle of the bike, but then a revised shock and linkage design for the rear end to elongate the back to 110 millimeters. And in the lineup of Specialized things, the Epic is no longer just a specific race bike as it has been in the past for XC racing, but instead a full family of lightweight mountain bikes. Now they have their Epic hardtail, which runs 100 millimeters of front travel. They have the parent bike of this, the Epic full suspension, which has 100 millimeters of front and 100 millimeters of rear travel. Of course, this Epic Evo in front of us with 120 front and 110 rear. And then the most recently released and absolutely radical race bike, the Epic World Cup, that rocks a very unique 110 millimeters of front travel and 75 millimeters of rear travel. And so what that allows for is that this Epic Evo slots in that downcountry flavor like we were talking about, and gives a lot of capability with weight being on the lower side of things. And of course we'll weigh it at the end, but that's something that, as we've seen trail bikes get bigger and more aggressive, the stump jumper has just gotten more capable over time. It also comes with it some weight, because with added capability means more durability, more strength, more travel, more tire, more everything. And that's where this bike is pretty cool. So this being the Epic Evo, this is running their 11M mountain carbon frame, so full carbon fiber frame. Of course, it also has a carbon fiber rear triangle on the bike. In the frame set, you have an 1.125 to 1.5 tapered head tube setup. Of course, internally routed cable routing, which gives a very clean and unique look to this bike. And one of the cool features I like about it is right above where the bottom bracket is, which I should mention is threaded, you can see this little rubber gasket, and that rubber gasket connects the cabling from the frame to go internal through the chainstay on both sides to the back shifting setup or the brake setup. Also, in that cool kind of internal cable routing elk, you've got a 30.9 seat post, of course, all internally cable routed. And something pretty neat is, of course, that seat post is going to be a dropper. Nice addition for this bike, something you don't always see on XC style bikes. But then again, this is going more of that downcountry flavor. Now, one thing I want to point out is Specialized has put a lot of thought and effort into this bike regarding integration of tools and things like that. This being an Evo version, they expect it to be a person who's out doing big rides in different conditions, and they have cool features such as this SWAT tool that goes into the top cap. Now this is going to be a multi-tool. It has just about everything you'll need here with a 2.5, 4, 5, and 6, even an 8mm slot, and then of course a T25, as no doubt with a bike like this, you might have some T25 parts on it. And I love that it just kind of slides right into the top. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to be saying, oh yeah, well, lots of brands out there have something like that. And it's true, but SWAT was one of the first to integrate that stuff together. And speaking of a first, and well, something that maybe, in my opinion, is not the best integrated, is going to be this SWAT box on the down tube. So Specialized first came out with this a few generations ago of their Epic series. But as you can see, the SWAT box allows you to put in your tube, your CO2, and an inflator setup. All good things, but man, why isn't it in the down tube? You know, we're in 2023, and of course, just about every big name bike brand is putting a SWAT box like that instead in the down tube of the bike for a nice clean look. And this one's sticking on the outside, and I think part of that is to do with making sure that this frame set comes in as light as possible. Again, like we were saying before, when you add things like that into frames, you just end up adding weight, and depending on the rider, you may or may not need that. And another thing that's relatively unique to this bike opposed to some of the other Specialized in the past is this is going to be a flex stay style design on the back end. That means you've got a single pivot just above the bottom bracket, which is in a position so that you're going to have good anti-squat characteristics, so the bike's going to pedal pretty well. Anti-squat means that essentially as you put weight onto the pedal, the natural tendency is for the bike to elongate rather than compress. And on more aggressive bikes where you have lots more travel, sometimes that's reversed because you want it to be more supple. But in this case, you want the bike to be light and active. Of course, a SRAM UDH rear derailleur hanger, so that nice universal derailleur hanger, which could run their new transmission, for instance, in the future. And what it takes away is Specialized used to have an FSR bearing setup, so a bearing just before that rear axle, which was what's called a horse link, for a full independent suspension from the pedaling platform. But in this case, they're going to use the pedals to help the bike be more explosive out, and use a flex stay where this chainstay is going to have slight flex as you go through the 110 millimeters of rear suspension. I should mention you do have a high and a low position. So on the clevis, you're able to adjust high and low, which is going to make a small adjustment of bottom bracket height and about a half a degree of head tube and seat tube angle. And speaking of those two angles, this being the Epic Evo setup, they're going to be a bit more aggressive than the other Epics, coming in with a 66.5 degree head tube angle and a 74.5 degree seat tube angle. And with all that fun and geeking out of the way, it's important we talk about the cockpit that comes on this bike at a pretty, well, aggressive price point, as you can see there. That's right, this being the Pro version means it's coming with all of the nicest parts, basically one step away from the absolute highest end that you can do. And that means we're rocking some Shimano XTR brakes with 4-piston calipers on the front and the rear. And then on the back, of course, is the XTR rear derailleur going through their wide range 10 to 51 tooth cassette to this XTR crankset. And I just gotta say, you know, I geek out on a lot of this stuff, and boy, is Shimano XTR gorgeous. Just the finishing quality, the way everything looks, you really can't beat a high-end drivetrain from Shimano as far as fit and finish is concerned. Now, to get that propulsion to go around, well, we've got some carbon fiber Specialized Roval control wheels. This is going to be a carbon fiber hookless rim setup, and it does have this bead of protection on the rim. It's a nice thick addition to help with rock strikes and keep the rim nice and strong. And they're laced up to these DT Swiss 350 hubs, and of course wrapped in some Specialized tires. That's right, the ground control 29 by 2.35. Now these 29 by 2.35 tires, these are going to be in the T5 compound, so a nice mix between fast rolling and durable casing setup. And then of course for suspension, no holds barred here with the Fox 34. Now this 34 features the Fit4 damper. It is, of course, the Kashima coated setup. So you've got 34 millimeter stanchions with this beautiful gold Kashima coating. and that coating is going to help with the slipperiness of the fork stanchions. And then up top, you've got compression, both high speed and low speed. And on the non-drive side, you do have a spot to be able to add and remove air pressure. Of course, through axle, front and rear on this bike. And then out back is a Fox float, rear shock, of course, Evolve canister and Kashima coat as well. Following that Kashima coat up, Kashima coated Fox transfer dropper post. And this does have the Fox transfer dropper lever, which I haven't had a whole ton of time to use one of these, but just here in the stand, it feels pretty nice. So I'm hoping it does out on the trail. Finally, race face cockpit with a race face aluminum stem and a carbon fiber handlebar is what rounds out the part spec of this Specialized Epic Evo Pro. The actual weight of the Specialized Epic Evo in a size medium comes in and weighs a pretty feathery 24.18 pounds.